The galaxy burns. The heretic falls. And the Emperor protects. Welcome, Imperial citizens, to The Emperor Protects. My name is Doug, and I am here with my good friend Dan. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great, my friend.
Yeah, and we took a little bit of a break because we got stuck on the Fulgrim Primarch book, and it just became the longest slog ever. But, you know, we decided to kind of reset, and Dan came up with the coolest idea that I was very happy about, which is essentially looking at some of the short stories that exist across a bajillion collections or anthologies, whatever the word is. And just picking out some of our favorites and doing kind of like a little book report like we used to do in school. And at least that was how I interpreted it when he said it. He said it a lot more maturely. And then I was like, oh, yeah.
Book reports.
Yeah. And I like the idea because there is one anthology series, particularly for Horus Heresy, that I adore, and that's Chthonia's Reckoning. So I get an excuse to share a couple stories from it. But that's what we're doing today. Again, the show is reading Horus Heresy books so you don't have to, and there are no shortage of small short stories about. And we'll read those so you don't have to as well.
There you go.
Dan, anything you wanna say before we jump into story time?
No, I just 100% what you're talking about. And when I got this story I'm going to do, it came from a book called Heralds of the Siege.
Yep.
And I liked this first story, and it was like, okay, that's fine. But then I started listening, and there's so many, and it's like this with a lot of the anthologies. There's so many good stories.
Yeah.
Like it's Typhus's origin story in here. And I'm going, wow, that came out of nowhere. And it just, story after story. There's another one, hopefully, at some point we'll be able to talk about a bunch of chaos warhounds that gang up on a giant warlord titan and try to take it down. And just so many great little stories. But and the thing about any of these, I think, Doug, is that they don't move the story ahead per se, but I think they help fill all those little spots and all those little gaps, and they help make it a fuller experience when you're doing Heresy. And the other part of it is that I think is you're well into Horus Heresy game, and I'm just starting, but I'm more and more I'm understanding why people love this because of the narrative piece.
Yeah.
And I think these short stories are a real treasure in terms of developing maybe a scenario or developing some part of your army that you want that you hadn't thought about before. So that's really neat, I think.
Yes, I would say short stories are perfect for scenarios, like for writing mission scenarios, just because they're isolated pockets of events with a strictly limited cast of characters that are highly disposable, and that's what it's made of. So I like it.
Yeah.
One of the things I'll touch on here before we jump into your story, I listened to a podcast many years ago about the original Horus Heresy, like campaign books. And they were saying that those were written like history books. Like it's very factual. There's a lot of third person information, whatever, almost as if someone was compiling the events immediately afterwards. And the Black Library novels are essentially those same events, but like from closer to first person. So like in real life, we have history books about war, but then we have firsthand accounts of soldiers who were on the ground. And technically the histories are identical, but they look very different. And I think that's the same thing that happens here, where short stories are great for like injecting a little bit of vision into the grand events that sometimes kind of seem bland in the campaign format.
Yeah, sure. For sure.
So anyway, with that said, I would love to hear about what story are you bringing for us today, Dan?
Okay. Again, it's from Heralds of the Siege, and it's a story called Myriad. And the story opens on Mars, the red planet, and it has been overthrown. Just as reference, if anybody is interested in kind of the backstory of how Mars was overthrown and became just a chaos, corrupted landscape, listen to episode 7 of the Emperor Protects podcast. We went over the book Mechanicum by
Hmm.
Graham McNeil, and that covers from the beginning through of how Mars was overthrown. So, uh, what happened very briefly is that Kelbor Hal, who was the fabricator general of the planet, um, was kind of manipulated into accessing this forbidden artifact. And it ended up that this artifact released um, chaos through him and scrap code into the entire Martian planet because of all the connections they have and everything else. And Mars was overthrown. So this story takes place after that happened. And it starts, we hear this rumbling from beneath the ground in a place called the Temple Terratine Assembly Yards. And this was a huge monster structure that was once, proud and productive, created the god machines that we know of the Titans. And now it's just a home of vile corruption. There's twisted constructs everywhere. There's this sickly glow of corruption and everything. The warlords and all the Titans that are there just have this weird corruption on them. You can see like mouths and eyes, and oh, it's gross. And that's what it's become. And just row upon row of these perverted monstrosities. And they're waiting to be loaded into these mass conveyors so that they can be delivered to Horus. The good news is none of them, including all the weapons and armor and everything else, will be going anywhere because Mars is being blockaded by the Seventh Legion.
Yep.
So, but here's the good news. That sounds horrific. Um, we meet this individual called Callistra Lennox, and she's a former princeps from the Collegia Titanicus. So she was a Titan commander,
Hmm.
and she's leading a strike team of various things, tech adepts, Skitarii, constructs. And what they're going to do is they want to destroy one of the warlords that is in the assembly yard.
Mm.
And um, they gained access to the assembly yards using a mole. It's got a name. It's called Archimedex, and it basically tunnels up through the floor, and boom, it's there. So, as a former princeps, she knew the weakness of the warlord was on its command deck.
Yeah.
So her goal was for her and her strike team to get a bunch of demolition charges and place them in the head of this Titan, and then just blow it the hell up, and really, deny it to the warlord, Horus.
Hmm.
Now it's still in construction, so there's scaffolding and gantries everywhere. So it's a prime target for sabotage because easy access, or relatively easy access in terms of physicality. And Lennox is part of a loyalist mechanicum cell called the Omnissiah Faithful. And she and her fellow rebels were survivors of the Martian Rebellion. And
Hmm.
so, as the scrap code ravaged through many on the planet, she and others that were left behind, because there are many, many Mechanicum uh, loyalists who escaped to Terra, including Kane,
Hmm.
who is he's the loyalist fabricator general, as it were, right now. And what they did was the people who were left behind, they mutilated themselves literally. They tore out all these implants. They burned out their hard links, their wireless receivers. She actually tore out one of her eyes, which was a bionic eye that could have been used by scrap code to access her.
Yeah.
So she tore that out. So she always wears a patch. And most of the other people have either been discovered as they have been going around doing their little, rebel raids and stuff, or they were just other people she was with at the time. So, two of the most important characters in this particular story, there is Omnex 70, who is a former Skitarii Ranger,
Hmm.
and he carries one of those big transuranic arquebuses, so like a, Skitarii sniper rifle.
Yep.
And then Galahad Zarko is a big Engiseer, and he's her other buddy. He has a huge power axe and that kind of thing. And then the third character is Radchek, who was her former Moderati. So they, you know, drove their Titan together.
Mm.
And he's at the time he's driving the mole. So as soon as they get out of the mole in this thing, they come under fire from everywhere. But they keep pushing through, and there's corrupted constructs, these great descriptions of all these horrid things that have been corrupted by Calvor Howell and the scrap code that are coming at them and trying to get to them. And they get to the Titan, they're climbing up, and like their eyes and mouths all over the surface of this Titan, and you're just going, oh my God, that must be
Yeah.
horrific for somebody who drove these god machines, when they're in their pure form. The people were going through like hatches, and it turns out they were giant maws that just swallowed
Snap
some of the
shut.
attackers. It's like, oh
Oh.
my gosh, it was horrible. So after a really deadly firefight, they made it to the command deck. And as they're looking out, they've got a really good vantage point. They see there's another Titan that's powering up. So now we're on the clock.
Hmm.
It's like a game you play, a computer game you play where there is a timer.
Yep.
All of a sudden, there's that pressure, right? So they place the demolition charges, and she orders a tactical withdrawal. And as the attack team boards the mole, they saw the head of the Titan explode, which is great. They knew they had accomplished their mission.
Hmm.
And they also see, though, the other Titan ready to fire its weapons. So she is like, okay, Ratchek, get us the heck out of here. And boom, they burrow back into the ground. And they note in the story how they could hear the impacts of this other Titan's weapons on the surface. They're so powerful, even as they're burrowing their way, um, back to their base. So they're a couple hours out from their mission, and they're returning to a place called Invalis Base, which is uh, kind of the rebel headquarters. We'll talk about that a little more later. But Archimedex receives a request for assistance from a loyalist scavenger team, because this cell that she's a part of, they do send out scavengers all the time, because obviously they need spare parts,
Yeah.
they need weapons, they need all these things, and there's plenty laying around that they can find. So the team is reported being pinned down by forces that have ident tags associated with Kelbor Hall. So very
Mm.
serious. But
Yes.
she doesn't want these scab. At first, she's like, well, just let him die. But then she thinks about it, and she's going, well, we don't want him to be captured, because binary torture, they're going to find out stuff. So she orders the mole to the surface. And once she did, she and Omnex 70 and Zarko leave the vehicle to find the scavengers. So the three of them, through this wreckage that they surfaced in, or watching this battle taking place, and they noticed that there are markings on these things of a guy who works for Calbar Hall called Gordical. He's a corrupted tech priest, and his forces have been appearing in areas closer and closer to Invala's base.
Hmm.
And Lennox is wondering if they were closing, maybe they're closing in on the base's location. They shouldn't be able to, but it just makes her wonder.
Yeah.
So she spots three constructs, and she orders Omnex 70 with his Coolio Scutari sniper rifle to cover them. Uh, so they close in on these three constructs, but she didn't recognize one of them. Uh, and the third construct, its name, and this is important, is Lank 4 of 12, because this particular construct will be important later in the story. And they said they found him just wandering as they were collecting salvage. So they thought, hey, another loyalist, let's bring him in. Um, and they're again looking at all these beam weapons firing back and forth. And all of a sudden they see there's a flyer that's coming over, but a beam weapon strikes it and knocks it out of the sky. And one of the constructs looks at her and says, we don't understand, because the Dark Mechanican forces are fighting each other.
Mm.
And this isn't like, in you get loyalists and they turn traitor, right?
Hmm.
That never happens on the traitor side. It's always, once you're a traitor, you're always a traitor. It never goes back. So they were just
Yeah.
shocked to realize that. And what they had been looking to recover, which is really important, is they had found a Castellan robot
Oh,
intact,
snap. Yeah.
which is huge. So they looked at the wreckage, and they look through the wreckage. They're looking at the Dark Mechanicus forces trying to recover the Castellan. And as they started working around the Castellan, they just started shooting each other.
Hmm.
And all of a sudden, the battle was over. All the Dark Mechanicum had killed each other, and there was
Yeah.
nothing left. And Omnic 70, of course, is looking through his scope and everything. He reported that all the traitors were dead. And as they investigated, they confirmed that Gordikal's forces had shot one another. And what was even more strange is and a lot of these were Thalax, by the way.
Hmm.
They found that some of the Thalax had no signs of corruption, which
Hmm.
was totally bizarre. Because if they're on Mars and they're traitors, they're going to be corrupt because of scrap code.
Yeah.
So very, very weird that that happened.
Okay.
So
Interesting.
yeah, so uh, so Zarko came over and he was examining the uh, Castellan. It had no bioplastic cerebra, no Doctrina wafers. In other words, no wetware.
Yep.
There was no operational hardware either. But there was no sign of corruption, which was the good thing.
Hmm.
But what they did see was this really intricate orb that was in the chest of the Castellan. It had all these polyhedron cogs. It was made up of a bunch of them and really complex.
Yeah.
But Zarko didn't even know what it was. He didn't care because nothing was giving off any of the bad vibes, the corruption vibes.
Yeah.
So Zarko made the decision because Lennox let him decide that they should bring the Castellan back, either to reactivate it or at the very least scavenging it for parts. So uh, they get back and they head back to Invalis base. One of the things that's important, and one of the reasons that the Dark Mechanicum have not found them yet, is they're in this dead zone
Hmm.
on the planet. There are these weird crystals that are growing everywhere. And what it does is it just totally screws up any kind of signals
Oh, like the
that,
auspexes can't scan
yeah,
through it. Yeah.
everything just doesn't work. It draws power
Hmm.
from, like flyers and stuff that tried to go over. Their engines just got sucked out of power and they dropped out of the sky. So they think that's one of the reasons that they've had trouble finding where they are.
Hmm.
So we meet three people in the command center when we get back there. So Cornelicus is a tech priest and he's in charge of base security.
Okay.
Then we meet Cytherian and she's like a logister and she's literally made up of all these calculus engines. It's a really bizarre construct.
Okay.
And then Sync, who is the leader of the Omniscient Faithful. He had been originally a Covenant agent of the Mechanicum, and what do those guys do? They're kind of like an early Inquisition for the Mechanicum. They hunt down techno heresy, and that's what he did before. But Sync is the founder of this particular cell. And later on, he has some really interesting quotes. He's a really cool character. But one of the things they talk about is he's like super old. He's really crusty and just, you know, he can tell that he is, but it just the fact that he even put this cell together and it still survives and has been successful. Anyway, so he's talking with Lennox, and first of all, he congratulates her, of course, on a successful mission. But then he said that there's a Titan, one of the warlords, Belladon Ventorum, which was the one that originally activated. Remember when they were doing their sabotage,
Yes.
and two other god machines. And there's a mixed Ordos Reductor force. They all left the Forge Temple and they're heading towards Invalis, but they stopped in that dead zone we just talked about. So they're
Hmm.
still kind of confused where everything is. But
Right.
the question they're asking is, how did they even know to get where they were?
Right.
Like they're not understanding how they knew what was going on. So um, in the base, there's a quarantine chamber, and the Castellan and this Lank 4 of 12 guy that we talked about earlier, this third construct, they're being sequestered there. And Link is really upset. Like he's like climbing the walls trying to get away from this robot. I mean, I can imagine that somebody would be pretty, you see a Castellan for the first time and it's like 12 feet tall.
Yeah.
You're like, I don't want to be anywhere near this thing. But there was something not right about the way he was so scared of it. And what they do is Cornelius, we talked about him, he's the security guy. He drops a bunch of mech spiders into the chamber, and they just start crawling all over the Castellan because they're sure that the Castellan has to have some kind of tracking device on it
Sure.
that brought him there. And these spiders are moving in and out. They're climbing underneath and into its inner workings and everything, but there's no trace of corruption. At the same time, though,
Hmm.
the cogs of this weird orb on the Castellan start spinning and
Oh,
reforming. And as they're looking at this, they can't look away. It's so weird and so fascinating what's happening. Um, and Sink, who is the leader, he goes, "What's the designation of the robot?" And when they tell him, he just goes nuts. He's like, "Oh my God." He goes, "This is the tabular myriad." And everybody's like, "What are you talking about?"
the
And
hell
he
is
tells
that?
the group that it's a long lost heretical device of monstrous power. It's an abominable intelligence. And he had originally, and this is the part of the story I talked about earlier before the show with, there's another book called Cybernetica,
Yeah.
where when he was one of the Inquisition guys for the Mechanicum, he had found this thing and he thought he had locked it away in a vault somewhere. So
Mm.
he knows what it can do. And when Lennis asks him what it does, he says, it wins. That's what it does.
Incredible. So my understanding of the story is like this was locked away in a vault. The civil war on Mars unearthed it, and it's just
Mhm.
chilling. And now any force that finds it, they all try to kill each other because it's so valuable. Is that
Well,
basically
that's what we know so far.
right? Okay.
And so it uses this computational power that even the Mechanicum can't understand.
Good.
And when you think about it, something that powerful, now it's right in the middle of their base. And this is why Sync is just going crazy. And I'm going to answer your question though in a minute because uh, there's something else going on with this thing. You notice that it turned the dark Mechanicum constructs against each other,
Yeah.
but it had no effect on the loyalists.
Right.
They didn't go crazy. Nothing happened to them.
Mm.
So
Mm.
um, all of a sudden, the Castellan just surges with power. Boom! It just starts coming out. Starts accessing all the base's room banks. Nobody can stop it. And even Cornelius, who's the security guy, he's going, "I have to disconnect. The thing's getting into my head." And he's got all these cables, going into his head. Lennox, she takes out her chain blade, just like smash, and she just cuts all these cables to keep him from the influence. And I'm going, "What a scene, man." You can just picture like a dozen of these cables coming out of
Hmm.
his head, and all of a sudden, whack. Um, so at the same time that this power is surging, the Castellan stomps over towards Link 4 of 12. And the cods of the myriad are spinning and spinning and spinning. And this construct is just screaming uncontrollably. And the Castellan's standing right next to it, silent, not doing anything. And for a moment, this construct went limp. He just like nothing. He was calm. And then horribly, he starts digging his hands into his torso, like his abdomen, trying
Mm.
to reach for something. I mean, literally, he's just ripping his guts out. And out comes this black metallic device just covered in spines and glowing with red corruption, right? So it was Lank that had the tracking device. It wasn't the Castellan. And the Castellan or the Myriad
Oh.
knew that this was in there.
So
It
he did like a
sensed,
scan of everyone. Was like, aha, it's you.
he knows, yeah, because
Yeah.
he can sense, or the Myriad can sense chaos. And the reason it can sense chaos is because it's all about perfection. It's all about the perfect code. And when it sees something like scrap code, it has to fix it because what does it do? It wins, right? Now, you think about it, and Lennox was thinking about this. Everything they saw earlier in the day made sense now.
You're right.
The dark mechanicum turning on itself, constructs free from corruption. That was all the doing of the Myriad and the Castellan. And so all of a sudden, Sync goes, he has this realization. He goes, the enemy of my enemy.
Hmm.
He says, we're not even perceived as a threat to the Myriad.
Right.
But
Right.
the dark, but the dark mechanicum is. right? And she asks another question. She says, "What does it want?" He goes, "It wants what it always wanted. It wants dominion over Mars. That's what it wants." And it's decided that the greater the number of pure constructs that are fighting the corruption,
Right.
the greater its chances of success. So, okay.
Of course.
And then Imperatus, which is this castellan, starts transmitting this perfect code. Everybody is sensing this perfect code, like it's the most beautiful thing they've ever um, seen, but it's also the most horrific thing they've at the same time. And it's just perfect. And throughout all the basis systems, this perfect code is just going everywhere. It's going out into the space the around the base.
Hmm.
And all of a sudden, all the room banks, boom, on the base go blank, and three words come up: adapt, enhance, replicate. Adapt, enhance, replicate. And you see it like when he's reading the story, he
Yeah.
says it like 12 times, and you're like, okay, I got it. But this is its thing. And here again is a quote from Sync. He says, "We pray to the Omnissiah. He's delivered. A dire weapon for a dire threat, fire with which to fight fire." And then he says, "This is a heretical weapon for heretical times. Let us all be damned, but Mars be saved."
Heck yeah.
You're like, oh, this is so cool. So just the quick turn in the story is so cool because really until this you had no idea what it was or what it was trying to do.
Hmm.
And now Sync orders Lennox to go to the surface and see what's going on out there. And what she found was this scene of destruction
Right.
because Belladon Ventorum, which had been coming after them with these two other Titans, it was attacking the other two with its Quake cannon. And it turned its Gatling cannon on all these reductor forces, these
Yeah.
Thalax and tanks and stuff. It's just hosing everybody and everything down and attacking it all. And I mean, everything just turns into smoking piles of debris, right? And she and her two, her three uh, friends. So Omnex 70, who's a Skitari, and Zarko, the tech priest, and Ratchek, who is her Moderati, they're all watching this stuff. And through the binoculars, they actually saw that the Titan crew from Belladon just literally jumped out of the hatches off the head and just leapt to their deaths.
Hmm.
So, but then they looked in the God machine. There was nothing. It was nothing. There was no energy. It was just silent, standing there silently.
Hmm.
And they kind of look at each other going, well, they start walking towards the Titan. And of course, Omnex 70 is covering him, with his arquebus. And they get to the Titan finally. And it's kind of a fun little scene because Ratchek, Lennox looks at Ratchek and she goes, "Moderati, shall we?" And he goes, "Princeps first, as protocol dictates." They haven't forgotten the old ways. And so they climb up into this thing and it's cool and it's quiet and everything is fine. Obviously, the code from the Myriad has gotten to this God machine.
Yeah. Purged it, I guess.
Yep, it
Yeah.
purged it. Yep. And Zarko checks all the comms and he confirms that it did receive the Myriad's transmission and it's broadcasting the code itself now. So it's acting like this huge antenna and transmitter for the perfect code for the Myriad. So Lennox and Radchik, they poured into the crew stations, and Lennox opens up a new spheric channel to Invala space and asks for targets. And Sync goes, "And the tabular myriad has provided them. In order of tactical importance, a 4,267 step strategy for taking back the Red Planet." And,
Yes.
and the story finishes. She gets this huge grin on her face and she goes, "Belladon Ventura, inbound."
That's
So
fantastic. Oh man, that is really cool. I like that a lot, actually.
yeah, that's it. I love the story. Just love it. It's cool because if you know Mechanicum and you
Hmm.
know what happened, there's this ray of hope all of a sudden. Even though it's it's kind of the enemy of my enemy thing.
It's a bitter hope, yeah.
Yeah, but still, knowing that they can fight back now is monstrous. That's so huge.
That's cool. It
Um,
reminds me of what is it? The game Blackstone Fortress that they had for
oh yeah,
40K a while ago.
oh
There was a
yeah, yeah,
robot in there. It was like one of the original Men of Iron.
yes,
And everyone just assumed
Uh,
that there was like a Mechanicus guy around somewhere who was giving him commands. He would just go off on his own. But it's like,
yeah,
no, he's actually like an independent heretical
yeah,
machine.
yeah, yep.
Oh, I love it. That's really cool. Thank you so much for sharing.
Mm, yeah.
Is that what made you want to grab some robots for Heresy?
Well, I had a AdMech army already in 40K,
Yeah.
and I love that playing that army. So that was something I needed to at least incorporate into my White Scars.
Yeah.
And it's stories like this though that motivate me to want to play it even more now,
Mm-hmm.
and have some Thalax on the board and stuff like that. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, very cool.
Awesome. Well, I will go ahead and jump into mine then. My
Yeah.
story comes from the anthology Chthonia's Reckoning, which came out with the last edition of Horus Heresy, where it's got like Sons of Horus versus Imperial Fists. And the specific story is the second one in there, and it is To the Last by
Mm.
Michael Haspel. Now, I'm going to abbreviate the names of the ships and the people involved are insanely long. So I'm just going to say the captain. There's only one. So like, there we go.
Okay.
But the reason I wanted to choose this story is because it is the only time I have ever been interested in the game Battlefleet Gothic. I normally
Oh,
don't do space battles or like
yeah.
naval history, warfare, that kind of stuff. Um, and I hope it comes back under the Horus Heresy umbrella because, quite frankly, this book made me so excited for it. So, let me set the scene for everybody listening. Let me get my notes pulled up here. We are in orbit above the planet Chthоnia. This is the homeworld of the War Master himself. And as
Mm.
soon as the heresy became known, the Imperial Fists who were nearby just snatched it up. That was I believe, the first Battle of Chthоnia.
Mm.
Um, I don't know how traitorous. There's not a lot of information about that particular action, but Imperial
Mm.
Fists snag it. At the point in our story, the War Master's fleet is right now hurtling towards Terra. This is when they get the band back together with all the Primarchs we talked about in
Mm.
one of the earlier books.
Okay.
And a splinter fleet on their way from Beta Garmin is sent to Chthоnia just as a matter of honor and pride to go take the War Masters home. So I did a full video series on 2+ stuff for the Siege of Chthоnia, like the actual campaign
Mm.
book where much of this is
Mhm.
going to happen. There's a ton of cool stuff, but this specific story, all you need to know is there's the planet, which is sort of like a hive world that's mined all of its resources out. It's far
Mm.
past its prime. And above the planet is what's called the orbital plate. Think of it like a space station that's more tethered. They use it to do docking and moving supplies. Everything that goes on or off the planet comes through the plate.
Okay.
Um, and we start our story on. I'm so sorry, I didn't go back and actually write out the names because they were so long
No.
and they were hard to remember. But our ship starts. We're talking with our captain, and she's bored. Everybody is so bored because we're sitting around. This is a frigate. We're just. It's kind of like when you're waiting for unloading and loading to happen. They got troops coming on. They got supplies going off, and so on. And it's a moderately well-armed frigate. Now, off in the distance, about 6 pings show up on their aspect scans of ships that are coming in like way fast. Like normally a ship would come into the system at a certain distance. These guys are coming in like
Mm.
on Chthоnia. And so it's reasonable to think that these are traitor forces. And so everybody, all the alarms start to go off. And right as the captain is beginning to give the orders for mobilization and stuff, a space marine from the Iron Fists walks onto the deck without any kind of introduction and basically says, I'm in command now, and you're going to do what I say, and we're not going anywhere. And his logic was, I have orders to protect the plate. Basically, it's him and like a squad with him. So it's not enough. It's not a lot of guys. It's enough to destroy the ship if they needed to, if these guys turn
Mhm.
traitor, but not enough to
Yeah.
really do anything.
Okay.
Um, and there's this great dialogue between the captain and the space marine of like, hey, you don't shut down my orders on my bridge. You know, that kind of thing where there's like a power struggle.
Of course.
Um, but the captain ends up like, saying, okay, I'm going to do what you say. We'll sit here, shields up, whatever. And all these other ships are going to engage these 6 pings that just showed up in the galaxy or the system.
Okay.
As they're waiting, now anxiously bored, about 21 more pings show up from a completely different direction.
Oh.
And it becomes clear that the Imperial Fists were baited out. So a bunch of their capital ships went out forward to engage this small fleet, thinking they were going to outnumber them, exposed where everybody was, and then now the actual force is coming in from the side. Which is like really cool.
Really?
There's another argument about orders, but this time the captain ultimately wins. And the idea is, well, we can sit here next to the plate and babysit it, but if we give them time to come to us, they're going to launch so many torpedoes that we can't stop them all. So if we move to engage them, we can at least take some ships out, redirect some of the attacks, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And the Space Marine relents, and the captain's like, no, maybe you'd like to go downstairs and hang out with your squad or whatever. And there's this great scene where he slams his feet into the deck and the mag locks click in, like as his silent way of this Imperial Fist being like, I'm not going anywhere, which was incredible. And everyone just kind of stares at him for a second. The captain is doing a scan of all these trader ships on this new flank that's just come into battle.
Okay.
And she recognizes one of them and sends a Vox to it. And it turns out that this was another officer whom she knew in the past and had turned traitor.
Oh.
And this dude is like the quintessential traitor of like bloviating, you're a fool, all this kind of stuff. We're going to win. And I'm going to yada, yada, yada how this next sequence of events, because it's a lot of like ship battle stuff. I want you to read the story. But essentially, the ship that we are on charges these newcomers, and about 5 of them divert to go deal with her. So it's 5 versus 1. Our ship does this like spinning barrel roll maneuver and then does double broadsides as it rolls directly in between all 5 of them and destroys 2 outright and cripples another one. And the whole time the ship that we are on is taking an immense amount of damage. I can't really express like all the little dialogue bits about like how are shields, engine power, what weapons are working. Like it's done exceptionally well. Basically after we pass through all the enemy ships, we're now moving away from Chthonius. So what they do is essentially hit the E-brake and hit right. And the ship goes towards the planet and dips so close to it that the bottom of the frigate is like glowing orange. And essentially using Chthonia's orbit to slingshot yourself around to the other side.
Okay.
So it was the quickest way to get back to the plate rather than turning around traditionally.
Okay. All right.
So now we're approaching the plate again from a different direction. Again, this is why I yada yada, because it's kind of hard to explain. Again, our ship is trying to distract, so we're shooting at everybody. They're shooting at us instead of the plate, but because we're so close to Chthonius, the gravity is pulling their torpedoes off track and kind of giving us some cover.
All right.
And at this point, our captain has an idea, and is the classic Warhammer tactic of beating the player and not their army, which is you get inside their head. So she rings up that captain again, the admiral of this enemy fleet, and just begins to absolutely ream him out. And the dialogue in this book is incredible. She's like, so acting polite as if they're evenly matched. She's just like, so tell me, did you take this command? Did you turn traitor because it was the only way for you to get your own command? Like, oh, I see you have this. That was salvaged from a junkyard. Are you guys really into recycling? Like, you know what I mean? Just asking all these, just like shooting left and right with stuff. It's incredible. And basically goads him into moving away from the orbital plate to intercept her. Like, just pisses him off so much that he stops playing for the objective.
Wow.
And so they're kind of in opposing directions at this point, so it'll take him some time to meet. And at this moment, the captain realizes that 2 torpedoes have been fired from a totally unrelated ship and are about to hit the orbital plate. Our engines fire up, and basically we act like a goalie and take the hit so that the torpedoes don't go into the plate. Which is like epic. There's a lot of damage to our ship. People are cheering. None of that matters because immediately afterwards, one of the loyalist ships, I believe it's the capital ship, it explodes, and as it falls, it hits the orbital plate, and the whole thing gets taken out anyway. So we did that for nothing. Now, at this point, in the greater context of the siege of Chthonia, this is when the planet was officially kind of deemed lost, because at this point you can't resupply any of the ships that are defending your planet. The traders own the skies. They can deploy wherever they want. So at this point, there's nothing else to do for our ship except to escape and try to warn Terra. Engines are being repaired. Shields are getting recharged or whatever. We're still hurtling towards the edge of the solar system on a direct route towards this enemy admiral. And the idea is we have to get past him somehow to get to the edge of the system so that we can translate out. And at this point, this dude is so ticked off at us that he's just like screaming into the Vox constantly instead of paying attention.
Oh, gosh.
And so to kind of greatly simplify it, what we do as a ship is we start moving directly towards him. And we scan his ship and see that there's a weakness on the right side. And so, without actually firing anything, we just drop and release a bunch of mines and torpedoes and all this kind of stuff directly behind us, because now it has our same velocity. And then we start shooting forward, draw a bunch of attention, and then our ship goes to the right, which causes the enemy to pivot to the left, exposing their weak right side. And then right at the last second, all those mines and torpedoes activate, go forward, and annihilate the enemy admiral.
Oh, sweet.
So everything was on delayed release. It was this idea of like, we don't have the guns, so they just sent the missiles and then drifted off lazily to the side and hoped it would hit them.
Brilliant.
With that, the captain basically sequestered somebody's like bottle of brandy for the entire crew or the command up there, and they dip out into the warp and are able to warn Terra about what happened here. So this is like the reason I mentioned before that like these stories are so great of snapshots is it just said in the campaign book, oh, one of the ships collapsed and the orbital plate went down, but this injected so much more drama into that event. And it was really cool. I don't know. I loved it. Like I said, it was the first book that has ever made me appreciate void warfare, I guess, in terms of ship to ship combat.
Sure. Yeah.
The way that commands were being fired off and the different, section heads were checking in about their status and their crews. It was awesome. And that was to the last. So yeah.
All right. Excellent. That's great.
Yes. And my next pick will also be from that same collection because that is my 2 favorite short stories. But
okay.
The other one's not space battle based, so it'll be a little different.
Okay, sure.
But yeah, that is it for our 2 book reports, friends. I hope you found that enjoyable. Are we going to do this again? I believe next time as well. I've been liking this pace.
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
That sounds good. That's very manageable for us. Do you know what short story you're going to do next?
Yes, I am going to do the Binary Succession, which is the origin story of the Adeptus Mechanicus.
So the transfer from Mechanicum to Mechanicus. Yes.
Yeah. Yep.
I like that. Okay. Mine is going to be Sons of Chthonia by John French, who is one of my favorite authors. Mostly does 40K stuff, but he did a killer job with this one.
Did is this about your Sons of Horus?
Oh yeah,
Okay, I want
yeah,
to make sure. I know it said that, but I want to make sure that your Legion's going to be in there. So,
yeah. And honestly, that's why I picked up this book. Anthologies are very hit or miss to me,
hmm
and I picked it up because I was like, well, if there's going to be one that involves the Sons of Horus, it's going to be here.
sure.
And it turned out that two of them were just absolutely stellar, just pieces of fiction. So yeah,
Great.
yeah.
Excellent. Excellent.
Awesome, friends. Well, thank you so much for hanging out and listening to us. We will catch you again really soon with some new stories to talk about while you paint and hobby. And Dan, anything else you want to say to the people before we head out?
That's it, boss.
All right, then, friends. We'll see you next time. Until then, may the Emperor protect.